Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we've been breaking down every SEC football game from a betting perspective this season, and we've made it to the final game. It's the College Football Playoff National Championship game between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Georgia Bulldogs. This game is going to be broadcast on ESPN on Monday, January 10th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be played at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. Bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, we made it. We're at the final game of the college football season. And of course, it involves two SEC teams, right?
We did. And I guess if you're a degenerate, you feel like you got to throw half your bankroll in this game since it's the last one. But hopefully people out there don't. I mean, you can have some entertainment money on it, but don't go crazy. And I was actually on the field for the last Alabama-Georgia National Championship game at the end. So hopefully this one is just as exciting. And if it's not just as exciting, hopefully we can make you some money at it. So, Nick, why don't you tell us about the weather, as it were, as well as who may or may not play in this game and Nick's news and notes?
Sure. So let's start with the line. The current line on this game, Georgia is a 3-point favorite. They opened as a 2.5-point favorite for this one. And then the over-under was opened at 52 and is currently at 52.5. Like you said, on the weather side of things, games being played indoors at Lucas Oil Stadium, so literally nothing for us to be concerned with as long as everyone can get to the stadium. On the injury side, we've given this preamble for all of our bowl videos about opt-outs and transfers and last-second COVID issues. I'd say we can throw most of that out the window here for the national championship game, except for the COVID piece, which is something you should always be checking for as a part of reality in 2022, even that football games could be altered and lines could be altered based on who's playing. We got to look no further than that LSU game in the Texas Bowl where they had to roll out a wide receiver at quarterback to show you how things can be impacted. So hopefully we don't, fingers crossed, we're recording this a few days before the national championship game. Hopefully nothing like that happens to any of the position groups for either of these teams, but definitely check on Monday before you place your final bet to make sure that something hasn't altered the way this game's going to play out. What we know so far as we go into the game here on the Alabama side of things, starters at cornerback Josh Jobe and Jalen Armour-Davis, guard Emil Ekiyor, right tackle Chris Owens, and wide receiver John Mechie III are all either out or could miss this game. Those are names to watch. It's unclear if outside linebacker Christopher Allen, who's been out for the majority of the season, but was a key piece of the week one starting lineup, could return for this one. That's another one to watch for. On the Georgia side of things, wide receiver Arian Smith, safety Tyke Smith, linebacker Tresman Marshall, linebacker Ryan Davis, cornerback Jalen Kimber, and guard Tate Ratledge are out, according to our friends at Dog Nation. Christopher, I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time telling people what they already know about these two teams before we get into the betting analysis, but I do want to set the stage for you just a little bit before you tell everybody how to make money. If you weren't paying attention, if you're under a rock on New Year's Eve, both of these SEC teams dominated in the college football playoff semifinals. There were doubters who were wondering if the SEC deserved two teams in the playoff, and the answer was a resounding yes. Alabama beat Cincinnati 27-6. They were almost a 2-touchdown favorite for that game. And after using their passing game to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, the Tide sort of reestablished their run game against Cincinnati. Brian Robinson ran for 204 yards, and the Tide had 301 total yards on the ground in that game. Oh, and the Alabama defense didn't allow a touchdown either. And then in the hours following that game, as you got ready to bring in the new year, you probably watched Georgia whip the Big Ten champions around the field in the Orange Bowl. The Bulldogs were a 7.5-point favorite against Michigan. Jim Harbaugh's Wolverines were beaten pretty easily. Georgia won that one 34-11, and really it may not have even been as close as that score indicates. So it was an easy cash if you backed Georgia. Stetson Bennett, who had been criticized for his performance in the SEC championship game as the Bulldogs quarterback, kind of got back on track and quieted his doubters coming into this national championship game. Had a really nice day, was 20 for 30 for 313 yards for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. And of course, the Georgia defense got back to doing what the Georgia defense does for the majority of the season, and only surrendering a touchdown late in the fourth quarter after that game had been decided. And I would just point out, you guys know the story now. Georgia was the number 1 team in the country for the majority of the season. Alabama showed up at the SEC championship game in early December and kind of shocked them with a 41-24 victory to claim the SEC championship and the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. Alabama's won 7 consecutive games against Georgia, including every Nick Saban versus Kirby Smart meeting since Smart left Alabama. That's 4 games. Saban is 9-2 all time against Georgia, including a 7-1 mark at Alabama. Kirby Smart is 0-4 against Alabama. Multiple conference championship games now. A previous overtime winner in the college football playoff national championship has shown us that Saban has sort of owned Kirby through it all, like it or not, for Georgia fans. Is Christopher, as we get ready to bet this game, we see Georgia once again as a favorite against Alabama. Can Alabama beat them a second time within just over a month, or is this the time that Georgia proves that they actually are better than Alabama?
Well, excuse me. I think it's a very interesting dynamic, right? In that we saw this matchup barely more than a month ago. I think it was December the 4th, if I'm not mistaken, between these two teams. And at the time, Georgia was a 6.5-point favorite. If I'm remembering right, we both picked Georgia against the spread in that game. Didn't turn out too well. But so you got to evaluate, like with betting, you never want to take a 1-game sample and blindly throw out everything that you've seen in the 12 games before it or the game after that. So I think it's important to note that in the SEC title game, I thought basically it was a absolutely perfect game for Alabama in almost every way. And I'd like to look at what went right for Alabama in the game and what maybe went right to see if it's repeatable, or to see how likely it is that it happens in the second meeting. And then we can also look at what I think will change between the two teams that would be different from this matchup as it was from the title game. So first, what went right for Alabama? Georgia did not sack Bryce Young the entire game. And I think this may be the single most important matchup or element of this game. It was, I believe, the most important element in the SEC title game. And, we've talked all year, if you've listened to our Alabama videos, that Alabama lost to Texas A&M, and then Alabama had 1-possession games against LSU, Arkansas, Auburn. The commonality in those games was that Bryce Young got sacked 4+ times in all of them. So the fact that Georgia sacked him 0 times was very interesting to me. Georgia's secondary is not great, especially relative to the rest of their entire team, but it's disguised by the otherworldly strength of their front seven and the fact that their offense usually plays with a lead. Georgia usually, Kirby Smart's philosophy is a big deal too. He has the best roster usually outside of against Alabama. Usually he has the best roster against any other team that he plays. And the philosophy on defense is, let's play it straight. We don't have to send extra blitzers because we can win one-on-one matchups. And why, create a risk? Why take a risk and create a hole in our coverage when we could just sit back and play straight up and be fine? Well, against Alabama, that doesn't work, especially when you have Jamison Williams. He's too good at receiver to give Bryce Young a lot of time and Jamison Williams a lot of time to get open. And that's exactly what happened in the first game. And Georgia, even though Williams is really good, Georgia completely blew a couple of coverages as well, which is not necessarily a losing a one-on-one matchup. It's more so just messing up the communication completely. So Bryce Young had time. He wasn't sacked, and Williams had time to get open, and Georgia busted on coverages. So it took all of that for Williams to score touchdowns of 67 and 55 yards. So it's very hard to drive the entire field on this Georgia defense. And that was why Alabama succeeded so well in offense, is because they had those explosive plays. But because of the game script last time, it forced Stetson Bennett into passing the ball 48 times. Now, Nick, I don't know if you've looked at the box scores from a lot of Georgia games, but Bennett is not throwing the ball 48 times in a normal situation. He's thrown the ball, in the low 20s in most of these games, sometimes even fewer times than that. And Alabama's pass rush knew that they were going to throw the ball when Georgia was down big and got to come after him. And the defense mixed and matched some coverages, and that led to 2 interceptions by Stetson Bennett, who has been very good at not turning the ball over this season. And guess what? One of those interceptions resulted in an Alabama touchdown. So Alabama was +2 in turnover margin. They also scored on defense in the game. Then Alabama also went 7-14 on third down because they had plenty of time to throw it. And Georgia only went 3 of 12 because Alabama's pass rush was really effective in the game. So, a lot of those third downs were even Bryce Young scrambles. I think he had 2 or 3 where he ran for the first down on those third downs. And what happened because of that is Jordan Davis and some of the bigger bodies on Georgia's defensive line got really tired. You saw them with their hands on their hips, they're sucking wind. So despite all of that, and I think in a lot of those cases, Nick, when I've talked about those things, it's like a domino effect, right? A lot of those things were interconnected. One thing led to another. And despite all of that, the perfect situation, Georgia had a 1st and 10 in Alabama territory with 7 minutes and 24 seconds left, down 14. They were a play or two away from still being within a touchdown late in the game with some momentum against Alabama with plenty of time to tie it up. So, it was that close from being a 1-possession game, despite the perfect script for Alabama possible. Now, coming into this game, as well as Williams has played, now that John Mechie III is out for Alabama, Georgia can focus its coverage on Williams even more. It's not that Alabama has no other receivers, but Mechie was setting some all-time records as an experienced upperclassman at Alabama, and Ja'Cory Brooks is his replacement. He's a true freshman. So despite his talent, I think Georgia can really, really focus on taking Williams away in the passing game. If Georgia is a little bit more aggressive coming after Bryce Young and giving him less time, that should also prevent some of those big plays. And I actually thought Georgia did that after the first drive that Alabama had in the second half in the SEC title game. And Alabama's offensive line has played much better. And after the Iron Bowl, they changed up the lineup. Well, guess what? 2 of the 5 starters from those games where they played really well recently, they've been out. They were out by the end of the Cincinnati game. They could be missing from this game. They should be fine at Ekiyor Jr.'s spot, as they got a true freshman 5-star there who has graded out. Actually, against Cincinnati, was the best pass blocker and the best run blocker on the entire Alabama line. And actually, he's the 5th best signee of the recruiting era for Alabama, right behind Julio Jones and Bryce Young. So they've got a super talented guy that they can replace if they need to at guard. But at right tackle, I've not been a fan of Chris Owens. He's been mediocre for a long time, but you can't argue with the fact that when he's been in the game last season and when he's been at right tackle after the lineup change this season, that's when Alabama's offensive line has been the most productive. And if he's out, Alabama does not have as nearly as good of a suitable replacement for him. So to me, he's a very key guy to watch. Now, the one thing that is going Alabama's way is that Brian Robinson is much healthier than he was in the SEC title game. And at least at guard, even if they have to go to J.C. Latham, Alabama's run blocking could be just as good or better. So they may be able to perform incrementally better on the ground against Georgia, but that's a monumental task for anybody to run the ball against Georgia. And then last, on the other side of the ball, it seems that Alabama starting cornerback Josh Jobe, you mentioned, probably won't play in this game. So Alabama will be down both its starting cornerbacks on the outside. They were only missing one of those in the first game. And also George Pickens, who is probably the best, or at least most talented receiver on Georgia's roster. He had only played 7 snaps since tearing his ACL entering the SEC title game. He's had more than a month to rehab that further, and he's now played in 2 more full games since then. And also the left tackle for Georgia, Jamari Sawyer, missed the last 4 games of the regular season. He was coming off an injury when he played Alabama, and the pass rush did pretty well against him. He stonewalled Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo against Michigan in the semifinals. So that's another thing that's sort of in Georgia's favor from the last time these 2 teams played. So just to break down what I think matters most for this game, and then we'll get into our picks. I think, can Georgia get to Bryce Young more often? That's number 1 on my list. Georgia has to be a little bit more aggressive. They have to send some more blitzers after him. The second thing is, can Alabama rack up explosive plays in the passing game? Even with Mechie out, even if Georgia blitzes more, sort of a continuation of my number 1 key to this game. And then, which team will win the turnover margin? If Georgia is -2 in turnovers again, it may be tough for them to cover and win. And then last, if the game is tight late, Georgia's 0-4 against Alabama under Smart, I believe. And I think all of those games have been huge. There's a lot of questions being asked this week. If Nick Saban is the boogeyman and if Alabama's in Georgia's head, you got to wonder if there's a very tight game late, if that might make the Georgia players kind of clam up or get a little bit nervous or get in their heads at all. But Nick, why don't you give us our listeners a little bit of a gift for the national title game, and then let us know who you're betting on.
Yeah, sure. So with bowl season winding down, our partners over at Action 24/7 Sportsbook are still giving you an opportunity to get a special deal as a new customer. For a limited time only, you can get your deposit matched 100% up to $800. So if you sign up today and make your first deposit using code SOUTH14, that's SOUTH14, Action will double your money up to $800. So download the app or visit action247.com to get things started. Action 24/7 is by Tennesseans for Tennesseans. You've got Action. And Christopher, before I give my final pick of the season, I just want to give a thanks out to the viewers that have been watching us all season, to our friends Blake Lovell, Chris Lee over at Southeastern 14 that have made it possible for us to give you guys these picks these seasons. I hope you guys have really enjoyed it. I know we've had a blast making these videos for you. Hopefully we made some money for you along the way, and hopefully we're about to make you some more money. I think we may disagree on the outcome, but you've laid it out in such a way that I think people can make an informed decision anyway. As I'm making my pick for this game, I learned my lesson, I think, the first time through. I know the script went just right for the Crimson Tide, and we laid out all the reasons we thought Georgia was going to win the SEC championship game. But I'm just never really comfortable betting against Nick Saban, especially in a big game. So I'm going to take Alabama and the 3 points and hope for a close game, maybe even sprinkle a little bit of money in on the Alabama money line to get a nice payoff if they are the national champions. But I do like the under 52.5 in this one as well. I know the SEC championship game was in the mid 60s, but as you've pointed out, everything was going right for Alabama's passing game to get us to that total. I'm not so sure that's going to happen without John Mechie, and with Georgia maybe a little bit better prepared to defend that type of offense from the Crimson Tide. So I like the under 52.5. How do you view this one?
Yeah, I think the under 52.5 is my favorite play, and it's a bet that I'm personally going to make. I mentioned the defensive touchdown. I mentioned Stetson Bennett throwing 48 times. I mentioned Jameson Williams scoring 2 very long touchdowns. I think if any one of those things don't happen in this game, which all 3 may not happen, but if any one of those things don't happen, I think you're looking at the total on the under looking much stronger. And I also will be on Georgia -3. I don't know if I'm going to bet it. Maybe I will, just some shekels just for entertainment value, but I don't think I'm doing it as like a money-making endeavor. But I think Alabama had a rabbit's foot all season. And the other thing to note is that Georgia didn't have to win the SEC title game. They were going to make the playoffs. They were going to be fine. You see them still in the national title game now. So they didn't have to win the SEC title game. They have to win this one. This is the one they have to win. And Alabama was the one who had to win the SEC title game. This is Georgia's chance. They have the better team this year, despite losing to Alabama. They had the better team all season. They've had the best team in the country all season. And I just think that if they just get a little bit more pressure on Bryce Young and just prevent Jameson Williams from scoring 50-plus yard touchdowns multiple times, I think the game script is completely different. I think it will favor them. I think Alabama is going to have trouble again running the football. And I think Georgia's offense, for a lot of reasons that we mentioned injury-wise, could be even better in this game than they were against Alabama in the first game, especially with the game script going the way they want. So I'll take Georgia -3. I think we both like the under 52.5. That's the one that I like better. But just like Nick said, thank you so much for watching us all season with the 14. And we hope that we can make you some money in the national championship game. Have a great game.